Tūtawa mai runga, tūtawa mai raro, tūtawa mai roto, tūtawa mai waho. Kia taua i te Māori tū ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. E ngā rauranga tira mā, no ngā pito o ngā haue whānau mai, haere mai. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Māori Tourism Panel. It's a pleasure to have you all here in the beautiful city of Auckland, right next to the gorgeous Waitemata Harbour. I'm Andrew Baker, the Cultural Development Manager from Air New Zealand, and it's my pleasure to be the facilitator for you this morning and for this panel. Let's take a few moments just to introduce the panel today. To my immediate left we have the Associate Minister for Tourism, Mr. Chris Tremaine. Sitting next to him we have the lovely Pania Tyson-Nathan, who is the Chief Executive of New Zealand Māori Tourism. Following Pania we have Mr. John Thorburn. He is the Chief Executive of Ngai Tahu Tourism. And at the end, last but not least, Mr. Tupara Morrison, who is the Chief Executive for Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei Whaia Mai Limited. The story of Māori tourism began in New Zealand. In fact, the story of tourism in New Zealand began more than 150 years ago in my hometown of Rotorua. People came from all around the world to experience the wonders of the pink and white terraces and the beautiful healing spa waters surrounding the Rotorua geothermal area. When Tarawera erupted in 1886, Māori tourism didn't end because Māori people, my descendants, my ancestors, had provided a level of manaakitanga, hospitality, that resonated so well with visitors that the guides themselves and the people who hosted those visitors became as famous as the pink and white terraces. And so today, it's relevant and appropriate for us to be talking about the future of Māori tourism and where we go to from here. So welcome, and I'd like to encourage all of our speakers here to give it their best shot today, Pania. There's a couple of people a little bit nervous, but look, we're going to get right into this. Just a few guidelines. If we could please save any of the questions to the end, we'll have a Q&A session where you'll all be able to ask your questions. Could we also please, just for this session, limit the questions from media only, and if you could please, media, prior to asking your question, let us know where you're from and let us know the publication that you or the organisation that you will be representing. That would be most helpful. For those of you who wish to ask questions later, the panel will be around for a short time later that you can ask offline questions. Kia ora tātou. I'd like to introduce now again the Associate Minister for Tourism, Mr. Chris Tremaine, and he's going to talk to us about the challenge ahead. Kia ora, Minister.
Te hei Māori o rā, whāta pai tāwhi te kia tāta, whāta pai tāta, whakamaua kia kia tina, tēnā koutou. Well, kia ora everybody, and it's a real privilege to be here today to address you here in the cloud and to discuss Māori tourism, and from my perspective, I guess, to challenge you, to issue a wero, a challenge to the future of Māori tourism about where do we take it over the next 10 years. Can I acknowledge, Andrew, thank you for chairing this, Pania Tyson-Nathan, John Thorburn and Tupara Morrison from Te Puia. Great to have you here and be on the panel with you today. The proverb or the whakatauikia that I used to start my presentation talks about dreaming big, about reaching out for the stars and pulling them close. And the reason I used that proverb to kick off my presentation today is because I think we need to be dreaming big in Māori tourism and setting a real big vision for Māori tourism in New Zealand over the next 10 years. I think that the stars align for this now more than ever before. I think the demand for cultural tourism is on the increase. I think the ability for iwi to invest in tourism assets is like never before as we settle more and more settlements. I think the appetite from overseas investors to invest in new tourism products mean that the opportunities abound. In my opinion, as a result of those stars lining up, I think we do need to dream big in Māori tourism. So what I'm going to propose to you today is an idea, a bit of something to get the imaginative juices flowing. It's not probably your typical presentation from a minister, where we put a whole lot of stats up on the board about the number of tourists that are coming here, or the investment that the government is making in tourism. You know all that. Okay? We're heading in the right direction. So here's my scene-setting picture for you. Picture this in 10 years' time. A group of 24 adventurous tourists aged between 18 and 60 are picked up from their backpackers hostels and hotels in Rotorua by four-wheel drive luxury Unimog. They drive southeast towards Murupara on Te Ara Tūhoi. Just past Murupara, they draw into a local marae where they are welcomed as guests to the Te Urewera National Park by a short-form pōwhiri before sharing kai, tea, coffee, riwana scones and jam, maybe even the local honey. They are provided a packed lunch for the next part of their journey, a stop at the amazing Whirinaki Forest for 3 hours mountain biking. They eat lunch in the forest and share stories of the history of Te Urewera and Tūhoi. Leaving the park at 3 p.m, they drive to Ruatahuna, where they stay on the local marae for the evening. The locals put down a hangi, share stories of the area over dinner, and bring out the guitar for a sing-along. The marae have utilised some of the Tūhoi settlement funds to invest in an upmarket backpackers lodge, converting an old homestead that was trucked in on 4 different pieces. 10 upmarket accommodation units with en-suites have been built close to the marae for those tourists that are not comfortable in staying or sleeping in the Wharenui. The next day they are up horse riding in the Te Urewera, where for 6 hours they travel through some of the most amazing scenery that these tourists have ever seen, experiencing the local guides. They are told stories of how Tūhoi people hold up in the bush from the colonial forces, never signing te tiriti or waitangi. That evening, the tourists are bussed to Lake Waikaremoana, to the newly built Eco Lodge, tucked beautifully into the bush, unseen from the road. The lodge recently won an architectural award for the most sustainable project in the Southern Hemisphere. Local Tūhoi people welcome them to the lodge with the traditional hongi that the tourists have learned as standard tikanga. Some of the group stay to walk the beautiful Waikaremoana track. Others take a day excursion relaxing beside Lake Waikariti. Tūhoi have invested in the upmarket eco lodges around the lake, totally hidden from view from the lake, which accommodate the higher value tourists. I mean, today we saw Ngai Tahu with packages on the Hollywood at $3,000 a day. High value tourism. The more adventurous of these tourists have gone pig hunting on one of the local sheep stations which abound the national park, while another group choose to work for a few days on a local dock wetlands restoration project where we harness that eco-tourism opportunity like never before. The bus continues the next day down to Wairoa, which has built a reputation as an arts and crafts village with a strong Māori flavour, together with an eclectic mix of artists from around New Zealand who now inhabit the once gangland town. The impressive Taki Timu Marae has been totally refurbished. Settlement money has built quality accommodation on the marae, once again for those not comfortable sleeping in the Wharenui. The hangi is memorable with wild pork specialty. And the Ngāti Kahungunu Kapahaka group are legendary, performing for guests before the guitar once again comes out and fills the sounds of the wharekai. Guests are encouraged to join in with an array of instruments available so that they too can participate in this uniquely Māori experience. The next day, guests have the opportunity of biking north to Gisborne or south to Napier. The Napier to Gisborne rail line has become Te Ara Heretonga, the East Coast Māori equivalent of the Otago Rail Trail, but better. Farming communities along the track have established bed and breakfast options for bikers. The hot springs at Moreri have been refurbished with a quality hotel and backpackers lodge. Did you know that Moreri Hot Springs used to be the second most visited location on the North Island of New Zealand? Chinese investment has partnered with local iwi to develop Moreri into a Maori health spa focusing on the Asian market. They have differentiated themselves by merging traditional Maori and Asian healing practices with a natural spa environment. Local marae have built small accommodation units with en-suites to host the riders on the trail, north to Gisborne, south to Napier. Te Uku Marae on the Mahia Peninsula has built a reputation for its beautiful location and sunrises, not to mention the paua fritters and crayfish salad. The marae has been experimenting with week-long Maori immersion, language courses which are going particularly well. And the Mahia Peninsula, while still supporting farming, has a predator-proof fence erected across the mouth of the peninsula, making it the largest predator-free area on the New Zealand North Island mainland. Tourists have the choice of spending time working on the numerous dock restoration projects on the peninsula. As a result, Mahia, local iwi, have become world-renowned. To the south of Wairoa, local hapu have also come on board to provide jobs and wages for locals through the investment in accommodation at Raupanga, Tangoio and Mohaka. The Mohaka Marae has become legendary for its kawai fishing, excursions at the mouth of the river, and Pahuera have jet boating and rafting on the Mohaka and have converted the viaduct into New Zealand's highest bungee and longest flying fox. Further south at Tūtera, the private investment from Julian Robertson and Maunga Haruru is paying huge dividends with the release of petrels into the hills. That investment has already started and first commenced in 2010. His support of the brown kiwi recovery is once again encouraging eco-tourism. Ngāti Pahuera have also invested in accommodation at Lake Tūtera, providing the place to stay before finishing the ride back down to Napier. Ladies and gentlemen, the vision of a few people 20 years earlier has created huge tourism investment on the east coast of the North Island, bringing jobs and opportunities where previously there were few. The investment has reversed the trend of rural Māori shifting to the cities. Te Ara, Heratonga and the Waikato Moana experience are now recognised globally as one of the most uniquely cultural and environmentally conscious experiences on the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a vision of the future, but it is something that I challenge the Māori tourism sector to start thinking about. This is just one example of what the future may look, but I think we have the capacity in New Zealand, the capacity amongst entrepreneurial Māori with the settlement process going in place to make this and other examples a reality. And I think they will bind uniquely into the fabric of the tourism product that we offer into the future. So there you go, something to think about, something that reflects on the proverb that I challenged you with at the start of my presentation. So whai te pai tawhiti kia tata, whai te pai tata, whakamaua kia u kia tina. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora for that, Minister. Made me a bit hungry there talking about paua fritters and crayfish. Wonderful visions, and I also see some of the people at the back scratching down notes for future ideas. I think you'll need to get some IP agreements off the Minister for some of those great ideas. That leads really nicely into our next speaker, Pania Tyson Nathan, who's here to talk to us about the strength and the depth of Māori tourism product. Kia ora, Pania.
Okay, anyone that knows me knows that when I give a speech I suffer badly from flatulence, so I have to apologise to my colleagues on the left, because they're going to cop it. He mihi nui, he mihi mahana kia koutou, and I'd like to thank Andrew very much for his opening. We've been told 10 minutes. You know, the other thing, I hate all the cameras, but anyway, I'm here to talk, and you've got to excuse me in my notes, but I'm here to talk to you about the depth and strength of Māori tourism products and its importance to New Zealand and the overall visitor offering. But I want to change that to the depth and strength of Māori culture and its importance to New Zealand tourism and trade. I want to do this because Māori culture and Māori tourism product are not only important to New Zealand's tourism offering, but also to the New Zealand economy and the culture, the social and psychological fabric of our country. Māori and Māori culture are integral and the vital part of New Zealand as a nation. How often do we hear the hongi referred to as rubbing noses? How many times do we hear the haka referred to as a warrior dance? These are important components of our tourism offering, but can I tell you that when I came into this job 3 years ago, the basic premise of Māori tourism was our entertainment value. Many of the images were warrior images with spear and tongue poking out, and actually I'm still trying to work out how anyone thought that might say, welcome, we'd love to engage. With absolutely no explanation, there is no context. Many of the tourism for mill opportunities provided free access, for example, the marae at Te Papa, or a Māori display at a local museum, also free, and maybe a concert party thrown in. I read numerous surveys and a number of comments relating to Māori in grass skirts and grass huts, and whilst they momentarily humoured me, left me aghast that this was the international image of Māori. Like I'm talking 3 years ago, not a survey done in the 1800s. To top it off, there is little understanding from a cultural perspective about why we do what we do and or what the significance is of the many things we do. Luckily, we do have operators whose tourism experiences explain this very well. This lack of understanding not only relates purely to tourism, but also to dignitaries that come to New Zealand and whom are expected to go through hours of pohere with little or no explanation at all of what is being done, what is being said, just that they are having a Māori welcome. For some reason, we think they should be wowed by this experience. And let's be very clear here, this is not Māori operators who are keeping visitors ignorant. Much more work needs to continue with the centre in terms of the way we communicate our cultural norms and values. You may recall a recent example where a Danish MP, Mari Crarup, recently commented that Māori were uncivilised because of their cultural practices. There were comments made about Crup's ignorance of Māori culture. Whose fault is it that she didn't know about the wero, the pohere or the hongi? That is our fault. As hosts, as tangata whenua, as officials in charge of visits. It's the fault of all of us that we failed to help her understand what was happening, what it signified, and why it was important. So it's not just about doing cultural things and doing them properly, but making sure that our visitors understand the depth and meaning behind those things. The upside of this story was the outpouring on blog sites by Kiwis, Māori and non-Māori. The downside was it didn't need to happen. So here's the thing. Visitors want to understand what they're experiencing and in the context of their own culture. So the culture-to-culture engagement is purposeful for all. Whilst there is still a prevalence of stories in the local media of Māori being mad, bad and sad, we are thriving as a people and we are proud. In 2010, the Māori asset base was totaled at $36.9 billion. Nearly $10.6 billion of the Māori asset base is directly related to the primary sector. But the Māori economy is expanding into other areas: manufacturing, nutraceuticals, construction infrastructure and communications. The treaty settlements portion of these assets is less than $1.5 billion. There is a significant pool of successful Māori export enterprises. Equally, we are seeing a lot of new investment in new and existing tourism ventures and infrastructure. The Māori population is young and predicted to grow by 20% over the next 15 years. We are better educated, we live longer. Cultural values are inherent and a unique feature of Māori business. Māori goods and services, including tourism experience, offers a point of difference that can be utilised and leveraged as a comparative advantage. Māori businesses and collective organisations have an intergenerational focus and strategic goals across multiple outcomes. Our experiences with delegations from China, South America, the ASEAN and so on have shown time and again that connecting culture to culture is extremely valuable and does help to position not only Māori but New Zealand. We are culturalising commerce. Conversely, for our source markets, the value of this type of engagement helps us both to gain an understanding of each other and how we relate. The level of engagement rises as commonalities become apparent. Respect and trust are the basis for relationships to develop and opportunities arise as the conversation moves to business. Consider these outcomes warm and fuzzy at your peril. The cultural connections work with all forms of trade, whether it's tourism, food and beverage, or whatever. It's about connecting first and then doing business. Now, for us as a country, we all know that New Zealand is a beautiful place. We have stunning scenery, fresh air, water, the works. It's a safe place to travel, and the people are friendly. According to a recent survey, the second most friendliest people in the world after Iceland. But there are many places in the world that do all of these things. We are often told that Māori is New Zealand's unique value proposition. Some say it's our remoteness. I say, so what? Unless we are all prepared to buy into a much improved and coordinated export sector strategy or action plan, then it is irrelevant. And not in my notes.